Number 1. The Plague of Athens. In the summer of 430 BC, the city of Athens was at war with Sparta. The city walls were crowded with refugees from the countryside. And then the fever came. It started with a headache and red eyes. Then the throat and tongue became bloody. The breath became foul. Then came sneezing, coughing, and violent vomiting. The skin broke out in sores and blisters. The sick were consumed by diarrhea, so severe that some died of thirst. Those who survived lost their fingers, their toes, their genitals. Some went blind. Some forgot who they were. Within 3 years, 75,000 Athenians were dead, including Pericles, the city's greatest leader. The historian Thucydides, who survived the plague himself, wrote that the catastrophe was so overwhelming that men, not knowing what would happen next, became indifferent to every rule of religion or law. Athenian democracy never recovered. Greece's golden age was over, and no one knows what disease caused it. Pericles was the greatest leader Athens ever produced. He built the Parthenon. He championed democracy. He led Athens into its golden age. And in 429 BC, he died of the plague. He was not alone. Within 3 years, an estimated 75,000 to 100,000 Athenians died, between 25 and 33% of the city's population. The dead were piled in mass graves. Bodies were burned on pyres. The living were too terrified to bury their own families. Thucydides, who witnessed it all, wrote that men died like sheep. The plague didn't just kill Athenians. It killed Athenian democracy. After Pericles died, demagogues took over. Athens made disastrous decisions. The Peloponnesian War was lost. The golden age of Greece was over. Athens in 430 BC was a city of about 300,000 people. The Peloponnesian War with Sparta had just begun. Athens' strategy was to hide behind its walls while its navy raided Spartan coasts. That meant packing the city with refugees from the countryside. The overcrowding was extreme. People lived in shanties, in towers, even in the city's water pipes. The sanitation was non-existent. When the plague arrived, it spread like wildfire. The historian Thucydides caught it and survived. His account is the most detailed description of an ancient pandemic we have from any source. What caused the Plague of Athens? For centuries, historians guessed. Smallpox, typhus, measles, ergot poisoning. In 1994, a team of Greek scientists excavated a mass grave from the plague. They extracted DNA from the teeth of the dead. The results were inconclusive. No known pathogen was found. The breakthrough is that the Plague of Athens may have been caused by a disease that no longer exists, a viral hemorrhagic fever like Ebola, but even more contagious. The disease that destroyed Athens may have gone extinct. But what if it comes back? The day of the Plague of Athens was not a government or a conspiracy. It was the disease itself. Thucydides wrote that the plague began in Ethiopia, passed into Egypt and Libya, and then spread to the rest of the Persian Empire. The disease followed trade routes. It traveled with armies. It spread on ships. The they here is globalization, ancient style. The same forces that brought wealth and ideas to Athens also brought death. After the plague, Athens tried to forget. The mass graves were covered. The dead were not named. Thucydides' account was copied, but not widely read. The suppression here is the suppression of memory. We don't want to remember how close we came to extinction. We don't want to think about the next plague. So we forget, and then the next plague comes. Today, the cause of the Plague of Athens remains unknown. The DNA tests were inconclusive. The mystery is whether the pathogen still exists. Is it waiting in some animal reservoir? A monkey in Ethiopia? A rat in Egypt? Or did it go extinct, taking its secrets with it? We may never know, but the next plague is already on its way, and we're no more prepared than the Athenians were. The Plague of Athens destroyed a city-state, but the next pandemic destroyed an empire. The Antonine Plague, the disease that brought Rome to its knees, and it was brought by Roman soldiers returning from the east. Number 2, the Antonine Plague. In 165 AD, the Roman Empire was at the height of its power. The emperor was Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, the last of the 5 good emperors. Rome ruled from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. And then the plague came. It began in the east, among Roman soldiers returning from a campaign against the Parthians. The symptoms were horrific: fever, diarrhea, skin eruptions, and a black, gangrenous rash that spread across the body. The disease spread like wildfire through the crowded cities of the empire. Within 15 years, an estimated 5 to 10 million Romans were dead, 10% of the empire's entire population. Marcus Aurelius himself died of the plague in 180 AD. Rome's golden age ended, and the empire never fully recovered. The Antonine Plague is named for the imperial family, the Antonines, who ruled Rome during the outbreak. The disease was almost certainly smallpox. The symptoms match perfectly: fever, rash, pustules, and a high mortality rate. The Roman physician Galen, who treated the victims, left detailed descriptions of the disease. He noted that it was highly contagious and often fatal. The empire was caught completely off guard. There was no quarantine system. There was no cure. There was only death. The Antonine Plague was smallpox, the same disease that would later devastate the Americas and kill millions of indigenous people. But in 165 AD, no one in Rome had immunity. The disease swept through the empire like a fire through dry grass. The breakthrough is realizing that smallpox is not a medieval disease. It's ancient, and it has been killing us for millennia. The Romans lost 10 million people. The empire never recovered its former vitality. The plague was a turning point in world history, and it was caused by a virus that we only managed to eradicate in 1980. Who brought the Antonine Plague to Rome? The Roman army. Soldiers returning from the east carried the disease home in their bodies. They spread it to their families, their neighbors, their cities. Here is the military. The same force that built the empire also destroyed it. The lesson is that war and disease go hand in hand. They always have, and they always will. After the plague, Rome tried to forget. The historians wrote around the event. The emperors built monuments to their own glory, not to the millions of dead. The suppression here is the suppression of the inconvenient. The plague didn't fit the grand narrative of Roman greatness, so it was minimized in the histories. But the dead were still dead, and the empire was still weakened. The next plague would break it completely. Today, smallpox is gone, eradicated by a global vaccination campaign that stands as one of humanity's greatest achievements. But the mystery is what other diseases are waiting in the wings. The Antonine Plague killed 10 million Romans. The next pandemic could kill 10 million of us. The smallpox virus is gone, but the pattern remains, and we're still not prepared for what comes next. The Antonine Plague weakened Rome, but the next plague nearly destroyed it. The Plague of Cyprian, the disease that broke the Roman Empire's back, and it was named after a bishop who watched his entire congregation die. Number 3. The Plague of Cyprian. In 249 AD, the Roman Empire was already reeling from decades of crisis. Barbarians were invading from the north. Emperors were being assassinated every few years. The economy was collapsing under the weight of endless wars. And then the plague came. The Plague of Cyprian, named after Saint Cyprian, the bishop of Carthage who witnessed it, was even deadlier than the Antonine Plague. Cyprian wrote that the victims suffered from fever, trembling, sores in the eyes, ulcers of the throat, and a bloody flux from the bowels. The disease attacked the limbs, the eyes, the ears. It caused paralysis. It caused blindness. It caused death. At its peak, 5,000 people were dying every single day in Rome alone. The empire's population fell by 30%. Rome never recovered. The Plague of Cyprian lasted 13 years, from 249 to 262 AD. It struck during the crisis of the 3rd century, a period when the Roman Empire nearly collapsed entirely. The disease is believed to be a viral hemorrhagic fever, possibly Ebola or Marburg. The symptoms match perfectly: bleeding from the eyes, bloody diarrhea, and a high fatality rate. The Roman Empire was already weak from internal strife. The plague pushed it to the brink of annihilation. At one point, the empire split into 3 warring fragments. It took a full generation to recover any semblance of order. The Plague of Cyprian was different from the Antonine Plague. It was more contagious. It was more deadly. And it came at the worst possible time in Roman history. The breakthrough is realizing that pandemics don't happen in isolation. They interact with war, with economic collapse, with climate change. The Plague of Cyprian didn't just kill people. It destroyed the social fabric of the empire. People abandoned their families. They refused to care for the sick. They hoarded food while their neighbors starved. They rioted in the streets. The empire didn't collapse because of the plague alone. It collapsed because the plague broke the trust that held Roman society together. Who was they in the Plague of Cyprian? The Roman emperors who did nothing to help. The governors who fled their provinces to save themselves. The wealthy who hoarded food and supplies while the poor starved in the streets. The they here is the elite, the people who abandoned their responsibilities when their society needed them most. And the result was catastrophic. The empire nearly fell. After the plague, Rome tried to rebuild. The historians emphasize the emperor's military victories, not their failures of leadership. The suppression here is the suppression of accountability. The leaders who failed were not punished. They were celebrated as heroes. The lesson was not learned, and the next plague would come for what was left of Rome. Today, the cause of the Plague of Cyprian is still unknown. DNA testing on skeletal remains from a period is ongoing in several labs. The mystery is whether the disease still exists somewhere. Is Ebola the same virus that killed the Romans? Or is there another hemorrhagic fever waiting to emerge from a jungle somewhere? The answers are unknown, but the pattern is clear. The next pandemic is coming, and we're still not ready for it. The Plague of Cyprian broke Rome, but the next plague nearly ended the world. The Plague of Justinian, the first Black Death. Number 4. The Plague of Justinian. In 541 AD, the Byzantine Empire was on the verge of reconquering the Roman Empire. Emperor Justinian had retaken North Africa, Italy, and parts of Spain. He was building the Hagia Sophia. He was codifying Roman law. And then the plague came. It began in Egypt, spread to Constantinople, and then swept across the entire Mediterranean world. The symptoms were horrific. Fever, chills, swelling of the lymph nodes called buboes, and black, gangrenous flesh. The disease was bubonic plague, the same plague that would later kill half of Europe in the 14th century. In Constantinople alone, 5,000 people died every day at the peak. The emperor himself caught the plague, but survived. His empire did not. By the time the plague subsided, 50 million people were dead, half the population of Europe. The world was never the same. The Plague of Justinian is the first documented outbreak of bubonic plague in human history. It was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, the same pathogen that caused the Black Death. The plague was spread by rats and fleas. It traveled along trade routes, on ships, and with armies. The Byzantine Empire was the center of world trade. That made it the epicenter of the plague. The disease spread from Egypt to Constantinople to Italy to Gaul to Britain. It killed indiscriminately, rich and poor, young and old, Christian and pagan. The Plague of Justinian was a turning point in world history. It ended Justinian's dream of reconquering the Roman Empire. It weakened the Byzantine Empire for generations. It depopulated Europe. The breakthrough is that this plague changed the course of history. Without the plague, the Roman Empire might have survived. Without the plague, Islam might not have risen as it did. Without the plague, the Middle Ages might have looked very different. The breakthrough is realizing that a tiny, invisible organism shaped the world we live in. Who was they? In the Plague of Justinian, the rats, the fleas, the bacterium. The they here is nature itself, indifferent, random, and deadly. The plague didn't care about Justinian's ambitions. It didn't care about the empire. It didn't care about the churches he built. It just spread, and it killed 50 million times. After the plague, Justinian tried to forget. He built more churches. He wrote more laws. He celebrated his victories in mosaics. The dead were not named. The suppression here is the suppression of scale. We cannot comprehend 50 million deaths, so we reduce them to a number. But each one of those 50 million was a person, and they are all forgotten. Today, the bacterium that caused the plague of Justinian still exists. It's called Yersinia pestis. It still kills. Every year, a few thousand people get the plague around the world. Most survive thanks to modern antibiotics. But the mystery is what happens when the bacteria evolve resistance. The plague is still with us, and it's waiting. The plague of Justinian killed millions. But the next plague was even stranger. It was spread by letters. The Hittite plague and the cursed correspondence that brought an empire to its knees. Number 5, the Hittite plague. In the 14th century BC, the Hittite Empire was one of the great powers of the ancient world. It rivaled Egypt. It controlled Anatolia and Syria. And then the plague came. It began in Egypt, spread to the Levant, and then struck the Hittite heartland. The symptoms were typical of bubonic plague: fever, chills, and swollen lymph nodes in the armpits and groin. But here's the strange part. The Hittites believed the plague was spread by letters. Egyptian prisoners of war had been brought to the Hittite capital. They carried the disease, but they also carried letters from the Egyptian pharaoh. The Hittites thought the letters themselves were cursed. They burned them. They prayed to their gods. But the plague continued. For 20 years, the Hittite Empire was ravaged. It never recovered. The Hittite plague is documented in a series of clay tablets discovered at the Hittite capital of Hattusa in modern-day Turkey. The tablets are plague prayers, letters from the Hittite king Mursalai to the gods, begging for mercy. Mursalai wrote that the plague had been raging for 20 years. He asked the gods why they were punishing his people. He offered sacrifices. He built temples. But the plague continued. The tablets are a rare first-hand account of an ancient pandemic and a heartbreaking plea from a desperate king who watches people die. The Hittite plague was almost certainly bubonic plague caused by Yersinia pestis. But the breakthrough is realizing that the Hittites didn't understand germ theory. They thought the disease was a punishment from the gods. They burned the Egyptian letters because they thought they were cursed. The breakthrough is that we now know the truth. The letters didn't spread the plague. The prisoners did, but the Hittites didn't know that. So they blamed the wrong thing. And the plague continued for 2 decades. Who was they in the Hittite plague? The Egyptian prisoners who brought the disease. The gods who sent it, or so the Hittites believed. The they here is the unknown. The Hittites couldn't see the bacteria. They couldn't understand the disease. So they invented explanations. And their explanations didn't save them. They didn't save their empire. After the plague, the Hittite Empire tried to rebuild, but the empire never recovered. Within a century, it was gone, destroyed by invaders from the north and internal collapse. The suppression here is the suppression of a civilization. The Hittites are forgotten. Their tablets are in museums. Their empire is a footnote in history books. The plague erased them. Today, the Hittite tablets are studied by archaeologists in Ankara and Berlin. They tell the story of a king who begged his gods for mercy. The mystery is what the Hittites could have done differently. If they had known about germs, could they have stopped the plague? Could they have saved their empire? The answers are lost forever. But the lesson is clear: ignorance kills. The Hittite plague destroyed an empire. But the next plague destroyed something even more terrifying: an army. The Athenian legion plague, the disease that wiped out a Roman legion in the desert. Number 6, the Athenian legion plague. In 410 BC, during the Peloponnesian War, a massive Athenian army was besieging the city of Potidaea. The siege lasted 2 years. The Athenians were winning. Then the plague came. It swept through the Athenian camp, killing soldiers by the hundreds. The historian Thucydides, who also documented the Plague of Athens, wrote that the disease destroyed the army. The survivors were so weakened by fever and diarrhea that they could no longer fight. The siege was abandoned. Potidaea survived. Athens did not. The Plague of Athens had already killed 75,000 civilians in the city. The legion plague finished off the army. Within a decade, Athens had lost the war. Democracy was overthrown by a brutal oligarchy. The golden age of Greece was over. The Athenian legion plague struck during the Peloponnesian War, the brutal 3-decade conflict between Athens and Sparta. The Athenian army at Potidæa was one of the largest ever assembled by the city. The soldiers lived in crowded camps outside the city walls, with poor sanitation and limited food supplies. When the plague arrived, it spread rapidly through the tents. Thucydides noted that the disease was the same as the one that had struck Athens a few years earlier. The symptoms included fever, red eyes, a bloody throat, and violent diarrhea. The survivors were immune afterward, but the dead were legion. The Athenian legion plague is a reminder that war and disease go hand in hand. Armies are petri dishes, crowded, stressed, and malnourished. A disease that might be mild in a civilian population can be devastatingly deadly in an army. The breakthrough is realizing that disease has always been a weapon of war. Not a biological weapon in the modern sense, a natural one. The plague was not sent by the Spartans, but helped them win. The lesson is that nature is the ultimate ally of the aggressor. Who was they in the Athenian legion plague? The generals who kept the army in crowded camps. The politicians who refused to negotiate peace with Sparta. The they here is leadership, the people who made decisions that cost lives. The plague was natural, but the conditions that made it so deadly were human-made. After the war, Athens tried to forget its losses. The dead soldiers were not named on monuments. The plague was not discussed in public speeches. The suppression here is the suppression of military failure. Athens lost the war. The plague was a convenient excuse. But the truth is that Athens was already losing. The plague just finished the job. Today, the cause of the Athenian legion plague remains unknown. The same mystery as the Plague of Athens. The disease may have gone extinct centuries ago, or it may still be out there, waiting in some animal reservoir. The mystery is what happens when the next pandemic strikes a modern army. What happens when a carrier walks into a military base? What happens when a modern military is crippled by disease? The answer is terrifying. The Athenian legion plague destroyed an army, but the next plague destroyed a king's soul. The plague of Mercilli, and the ruler who begged his gods for death. Number 7. The Plague of Mercilli. King Mercilli II of the Hittite Empire was a young man when the plague struck. He had just become king. He was preparing for war. And then his father died. His brother died. His cousin died. His generals died. His priest died. The plague swept through the royal family, killing everyone around him. Mercilli survived, but he was broken. He wrote a series of plague prayers to the gods, begging for mercy. For 20 years, he wrote, "People have been dying. No one prepares the sacrificial bread. No one pours the libations. The gods have abandoned us." Mercilli's prayers are the most heartbreaking documents from the ancient world. A king on his knees, begging for the death to stop. The plague of Mercilli is documented in the same clay tablets as the Hittite plague. Mercilli's prayers are addressed to the sun goddess of Arena, the storm god of Hutti, and other Hittite deities. He asks why the gods are punishing his people. He offers sacrifices. He builds temples. He even investigates a possible sin that might have caused the plague. But the gods do not answer. The plague continues. Mercilli's prayers are a window into the soul of a man who has lost everything. The plague of Mercilli was almost certainly bubonic plague caused by Yersinia pestis. But the breakthrough is not medical, it's psychological. Mercilli's prayers show us how ancient people coped with pandemics. They didn't understand germs. They didn't understand rats and fleas. They thought the plague was a punishment from the gods. So they prayed. They sacrificed. They built temples. And when the plague continued, they prayed harder. The breakthrough is that we now know the truth. The gods didn't send the plague. The rats did. But Mercilli didn't know that. So he blamed himself. Who was they in the plague of Mercilli? The gods. The gods that Mercilli begged for mercy. The gods that never answered. They. Here is the supernatural, the invisible forces that ancient people believed control their lives. Mercilli's prayers are a testament to human helplessness in the face of disease. He could fight armies. He could build temples. He could write laws. But he could not stop a bacterium. After the plague, Mercilli tried to rebuild. He reconquered lost territories. He built new temples. He wrote new laws. But the suppression here is the suppression of grief. Marcellin never got over the loss of his family. He never stopped praying. The tablets are his testimony, a record of his pain, preserved for over 3,000 years. Today, Marcellin's tablets are in museums in Ankara and Berlin. They are studied by historians and translated by linguists. The mystery is what Marcellin would think if he knew the truth. If he knew that the plague was caused by rats, not gods. Would he be relieved? Would he be angry? Would he feel betrayed by the gods he worshipped? We'll never know, but his pain is still palpable, and his prayers are still unanswered. Marcellin's plague destroyed a family, but the next plague destroyed an entire civilization. The Carthaginian plague and the empire that vanished from history. Number 8. The Carthaginian plague. In 396 BC, the city of Carthage was one of the wealthiest and most powerful cities in the Mediterranean. It controlled trade routes across North Africa, Spain, and Sicily. It was a rival to Greece and Rome. And then the plague came. It struck during a war with Syracuse, a Greek city in Sicily. The Carthaginian army, besieging Syracuse, was decimated by disease. The soldiers died by the thousands. The survivors fled in panic. The plague followed them back to Carthage on the ships. Within a year, the city was paralyzed. The economy collapsed. The government fell. Carthage never fully recovered. Within a century, it was conquered by Rome. The plague didn't just weaken Carthage, it destroyed it. The Carthaginian plague is described by the Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, who wrote a detailed history of the Mediterranean world. He wrote that the disease destroyed the Carthaginian army and then spread to the city itself with terrifying speed. The symptoms included fever, open sores, and a bloody cough, suggesting a respiratory disease like plague or typhus. The Carthaginians had no immunity to this new disease. The sickness swept through the population, killing young and old, rich and poor alike. The city's defenses crumbled. The government was paralyzed. Within a generation, Carthage was a shadow of its former self. The Carthaginian plague is a reminder that disease can change the course of history. Without the plague, Carthage might have defeated Syracuse. It might have expanded its empire across the Mediterranean. It might have rivaled Rome for centuries. The breakthrough is realizing that a single disease outbreak can alter the destiny of continents. The plague didn't just kill Carthaginians. It killed Carthage's future, and Rome rose in its place. Who was they in the Carthaginian plague? The rats? The fleas? The bacteria? The they. Here is the randomness of history. Carthage was not destroyed by a conqueror with an army. It was destroyed by a microbe invisible to the naked eye. The same microbe that could destroy us today. After the plague, Carthage tried to forget. The historians wrote about the wars, not the disease. The suppression here is the suppression of the humiliating. Carthage was not defeated by a superior enemy in battle. It was defeated by a disease. That's not a story they wanted to tell future generations. So they didn't, and the plague was largely forgotten. Today, the cause of the Carthaginian plague is still unknown. The symptoms suggest plague or typhus, but no DNA testing has been done on skeletal remains from the period. The mystery is whether the disease still exists somewhere. Is it waiting in some animal reservoir in North Africa? Or did it go extinct with Carthage itself? The answers are unknown, but the lesson is clear. Empires are fragile, and disease is the great equalizer. The Carthaginian plague destroyed an empire, but the next plague destroyed an entire age. The great pestilence of Mesopotamia and the Bronze Age collapse. Number 9. The great pestilence of Mesopotamia. Around 1200 BC, the ancient world collapsed. The Hittite Empire vanished from history. The Mycenaean Greeks abandoned their great cities. The Egyptian Empire shrank to its core territory. Trade routes were cut. Writing was forgotten in many regions. For centuries, historians blamed invaders, the mysterious sea peoples who swept through the eastern Mediterranean. But new research suggests a different culprit: disease. Archaeologists have found mass graves across the Near East dating to the Bronze Age collapse. The bodies show clear signs of infectious disease. The plague that destroyed the Hittites may have spread across the entire region. It may have killed so many people that civilization itself collapsed. The Great Pestilence of Mesopotamia didn't just kill people. It killed the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age collapse was one of the greatest catastrophes in human history. Almost every civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean collapsed within a few decades. Cities were abandoned. Trade stopped. Writing disappeared. The cause has been debated for centuries. Earthquakes, drought, invasion, or some combination. But new evidence points to disease. Mass graves from the period contain bodies with signs of infection. The same pathogen that caused the Hittite plague may have spread across the entire region. The Great Pestilence may have been the trigger that brought down the Bronze Age. In 2020, a team of scientists published a study of ancient DNA from the Bronze Age collapse. They found evidence of Yersinia pestis, bubonic plague, in multiple skeletons from the period across different sites. The breakthrough is that the Great Pestilence was real. The plague that killed the Hittites spread across the Mediterranean world. It depopulated cities. It collapsed economies. It ended the Bronze Age. The pandemic didn't just kill people, it killed a way of life. And it took centuries for human civilization to recover. Who was they in the Great Pestilence? The rats, the fleas, the bacteria. The they here is the same they that destroyed Carthage and Rome. The plague is the great leveler. It doesn't care about your wealth, your power, or your armies. It kills everyone equally, and it always has. After the Bronze Age collapse, the survivors tried to rebuild. They forgot the old ways. They invented new gods. They told new stories. The suppression here is the suppression of an entire era. The Bronze Age was forgotten. Its cities were buried under dust. Its writing was lost for thousands of years. The plague erased it all, and it took archaeologists centuries to rediscover it. Today, the Great Pestilence is still being studied. Scientists are extracting DNA from more skeletons, mapping the spread of the plague across the ancient world. The mystery is how many people actually died. The Bronze Age collapse was catastrophic, but we may never know the true scale of the pandemic. The dead are buried. The cities are in ruins. The plague is gone, but the pattern remains. 9 pandemics, 9 catastrophes. Number 10 reveals the pattern that connects them all, and the terrifying lesson for our own time. Number 10, the pattern of extinction. We see 9 pandemics. The Plague of Athens, which destroyed Athenian democracy and ended Greece's golden age. The Antonine Plague, which ended Rome's golden age and killed 10 million people. The Plague of Cyprian, which nearly broke the Roman Empire entirely. The Plague of Justinian, which killed 50 million people and changed the course of history. The Hittite Plague, which destroyed an empire and broke a king's soul. The Athenian Legion Plague, which destroyed an army and lost a war. The Plague of Mercellae, which left a king begging his gods for mercy. The Carthaginian Plague, which destroyed a civilization that might have rivaled Rome. And the Great Pestilence of Mesopotamia, which ended the entire Bronze Age. Each one was devastating. Each one changed the course of history. And each one followed the same pattern. A new disease emerges. The population has no immunity. The disease spreads along trade routes. The leaders do nothing effective. The people panic. The society collapses. And then, after years of death, the disease fades away. The survivors rebuild. The memory fades. And then the next pandemic comes. The pattern has repeated for thousands of years. And it's repeating right now. The pattern of pandemics is not random. It's driven by the same forces that drive civilization itself: trade, travel, and population density. The Plague of Athens spread because Athens was a trading hub. The Antonine Plague spread because Roman soldiers traveled across the empire. The Plague of Justinian spread because Byzantine ships carried rats from Egypt to Constantinople. The Great Pestilence spread because Bronze Age trade routes connected the entire Eastern Mediterranean. The pattern is clear. Pandemics are a byproduct of civilization. The more connected we are, the more vulnerable we become. And we are more connected today than ever before in human history. The lesson of history is not simply that pandemics happen. The lesson is that they will keep happening, and we are not prepared. The pattern of pandemics is also driven by the same forces that drive human behavior: denial, fear, and blame. The Athenians blamed the Spartans for poisoning their wells. The Romans blamed the Christians for angering the gods. The Hittites blamed the gods themselves. The Carthaginians blamed the Syracusans for sending the plague. The survivors blamed everyone except themselves. The pattern is clear. When pandemics strike, we look for someone to blame. We scapegoat the outsider. We punish the innocent. We ignore the science. And the disease keeps spreading. The pattern is not just medical. It's psychological, and it's killing us. The breakthrough is realizing that the biggest obstacle to stopping pandemics is not the disease, it's ourselves. We refuse to learn from history. We refuse to prepare for the future. We refuse to change our behavior. And then the next pandemic comes, and we're shocked. Every single time. The suppression of pandemic history is the suppression of the pattern. We don't want to remember how bad it was. We don't want to think about the next one. So we forget. The historians write about wars, not diseases. The textbooks emphasize kings and generals, not plagues and bacteria. The suppression here is the suppression of memory. And the result is that we are doomed to repeat the past. The Plague of Athens, the Antonine Plague, the Plague of Cyprian, the Plague of Justinian, the Hittite Plague, the Athenian Legion Plague, the Plague of Marseille, the Carthaginian Plague, the Great Pestilence, the Black Death, the Spanish Flu, COVID-19. The pattern is always the same. The names change. The disease changes. The outcome is the same: death, panic, and collapse. And then forgetting. And then the next one. Today, the pattern continues. A new pandemic will come. We don't know when. We don't know what disease. But we know it's coming. The mystery is whether we will be ready this time. Will we listen to the scientists? Will we trust the evidence? Will we cooperate across borders? Or will we repeat the same mistakes? Denial, fear, blame, and collapse? The answer is not written in the past. It's written in us. The pattern of pandemics is the pattern of human nature. We are the disease. We are the cure. And we're the only ones who can break the cycle. 9 pandemics. 1 pattern. The same mistakes repeated for thousands of years. The question is not whether the next pandemic will come. It will. The question is whether we will finally learn from the past. The answer is up to us. We started with the Plague of Athens, a disease that destroyed democracy and ended Greece's golden age. We end with the Great Pestilence of Mesopotamia, a pandemic that ended the entire Bronze Age itself. In between, we've seen the Antonine Plague that ended Rome's golden age, the Plague of Cyprian that nearly broke the Roman Empire, the Plague of Justinian that killed 50 million people, the Hittite Plague that destroyed an empire, the Athenian Legion Plague that destroyed an army, the Plague of Marseille that broke a king's soul, and the Carthaginian Plague that destroyed a civilization. The pattern is undeniable. Pandemics have shaped human history. They have destroyed empires. They have ended ages. They have killed millions upon millions. And they will come again. The question is not whether we will face another pandemic. We will. The question is whether we will be ready when it comes. The past tells us that we won't be ready. But the past also tells us that we can change. The pattern can be broken, but only if we remember, only if we learn, only if we act. The tragedy is not that pandemics happen. The tragedy is that we refuse to learn from them. We forget the dead. We ignore the warnings. We repeat the same mistakes over and over again. The tragedy is our own amnesia. The pattern will continue until we break it. And we can only break it by remembering what happened before. The past is not a foreign country. It is us. And the next pandemic is already on its way. The forgetting continues. But you now know the pattern. You now know the history. You are no longer ignorant. You are a witness. And witnesses have a duty to remember. Share this video with someone who needs to know. Start the conversation with your friends and family. Demand preparedness from your leaders. Break the cycle of amnesia. Save lives. So we leave you with this question. Which of these 10 pandemics terrifies you the most? And do you think we're ready for the next one? What will happen when a new disease emerges? One we have no immunity to, one with no treatment, one that spreads faster than anything we've seen before. Comment below. I read every single one. and I'll pin the most thoughtful answer to the top. Next time, we investigate the plagues that are still with us, the diseases hiding in plain sight, waiting for their next opportunity. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching, and stay safe. The next pandemic is coming. Whether we survive, it depends on whether we remember the past.